Well, I wanted to have some control of my future, and I just wanted Navy no matter what, and I made that decision.
Good morning. I'm Dave Melodams of the National Veterans History Archival Institute, and today is November 14th, 2009. And I have before me James Thomas DellaPenna. Do you go by James or Jim?
Jim.
Just to get started, Jim, where were you born and what's your birthday?
Ware, Massachusetts, June 26, 1945.
Okay. Did you go to high school in Massachusetts?
Yeah. It's a little town called Hardwick.
Where's that located?
8 miles north of the hospital in Ware.
Well, let's see. You would have been graduating from high school right around 1962, 63.
63.
Vietnam was just starting.
It hadn't quite, I don't think. I think it was the next year or so when I was in college, when the Gulf of Tonkin.
Where did you go to college?
Northeastern University in Boston.
At that time, did Northeastern have an ROTC program?
They did, but it was Army only, and I was leaning toward Navy all the way. So
How come?
In fact, there were very few Navy programs in ROTC available in the country. So I don't know why, because my dad was in the Army. Ever since I was a kid, I was enthralled with Navy, and my plan originally had been to get a college degree, enter the Navy pilot program, and then become a commercial pilot afterwards. Didn't work out that way, but I still entered the Navy eventually as an enlistee.
You enlisted in September of 1968. So by that time, you had completed college. You were about 23 years old. What did you get your college degree in?
Business administration.
What were you doing at the time?
Mostly waiting on my reply from application to Navy OCS. At the time, I think there was a feeling amongst college graduates who wanted to become officers that the Navy might be the safest place to be. So I had a lot of competition, and they were just taking the cream of the crop A students. And being a C student, I didn't have a chance in hell, but I went through the motions. And so I was on a 120-day inactive reserve that summer to fend off the draft while waiting for a reply.
So in 68, you decided to enlist rather than wait to get drafted.
Right.
Okay. A lot of men did that back then.
Well, I wanted to have some control of my future, and I just wanted Navy no matter what, and I made that decision. And this is something I would have done whether Vietnam had existed or not. And I just wanted to do it.
How did your parents feel about your enlisting at that time?
It was a foregone conclusion. My dad was, he was a World War II vet, drove an ambulance in Europe. I don't know. I just grew up in a culture. He was not pro-military as such, because he actually saw some of the worst of the beaten up bodies and whatever. But I just grew up in a culture in that small town that military service was expected. I mean, it wasn't something you questioned. You did it. And it was a matter of just laying back and letting the Army pull you in and as a draftee or making a choice. And my parents didn't really object one way or another. They thought it was great that I was making my own decisions. Well,
at that time, in 68, Vietnam had been going on for at least 4 years, pretty hot. And it was not the most popular war to be involved in, especially with kids our generation. I went in 69, months after you. And how did you, or was activity in that small town, did your association with the kids in that small town get split up because of your desire to enlist? I guess that's what I'm looking for.
I didn't really have
You don't have any run-ins like that.
No, I didn't really have much association with kids at that point in my own hometown because of my 5 years at Northeastern. It's a 5-year program, and I'd really had moved on from Hardwick, Massachusetts, and never expected to return there anyway. Being a small town, didn't really have that much to offer for my future as I saw it. Northeastern was a different situation. Even in '68, the predominant attitude among students at the time was pro-Vietnam.
Really?
Yes, it was.
That's interesting.
That
There's a lot of universities weren't.
I know that, but it may have had something to do with the influence of ROTC on campus. My best friend was a member of it. We did have a Students for Democratic Society, and they were quite active on campus, but they had a very small following, and they were mostly regarded with disdain. That was my experience, at least in that time frame. Later on in the service, when I got into the California environment, whoa, what a difference.
Culture shock.
Oh man, I mean, there were so, you visit places like the Berkeley campus and
Oh God.
and you just go to San Francisco, and you have the Hare Krishna chants and parades in the streets, and okay, and it was quite a drug culture. I mean, this was something I had not really been exposed to, and it liberated my opinions a great deal. And during the service, I began getting some rather reluctant feelings about what we were doing in Vietnam myself. But I was also a member of the service, made that commitment, and stuck to it. This is what I'm doing now, and I will do it to the best of my ability. Period.
Okay. Do you remember your first day of boot camp?
Certainly.
What was that like? First of all,
I
where
had my clothing thrown at me.
where did you go?
This was Great Lakes Trash.
Okay.
Illinois. Yeah, the clothing was thrown at me. I immediately got the impression that everybody worked there who was on shore duty hated it. That wasn't necessarily true, but they act like it. And of course, I'm sure we had shots the first day. I'm certain of it. And we slept in an open barracks and all that. And I think it was like a day or two later, we marched over to Maine side in the Navy boondockers. And our particular barracks was way down at the far end. It was probably a 1.5 mile march in those boondockers, and I had quarter-size blisters on both heels. What the top I got there.
Do you remember lying awake in your bunk that first night, wondering what's going on?
Actually, no.
Okay.
They wore you out every day, and we slept well. I did anyway.
Were you ready for it physically, mentally?
Oh yes. I knew that it wasn't going to be a lark, but compared to simply Army or Marines, I think Navy was rather easy.
Now, at this time you're in boot camp, you're 23 years old, and the unit you were with, were you the old man?
No, there were several college graduates in there.
Okay. Taking the same route as you did?
Maybe out of 90, company of 90, maybe 10 of us were college grads.
Okay.
And there were more at some college.
Was it predominantly enlistees or predominantly draftees?
Oh, these were all enlistees.
Okay.
In my company, there was a contingent from the Boston Center, and there was a large contingent from North Carolina. In fact, I think 2/3 of the company was from North Carolina, which is ironic since it's where I live now.
Must have rubbed off on you. How long was boot camp back then?
I believe it was 12 weeks.
Okay.
I want to say 12 weeks. I think I don't know if they've shortened it or not since then, but that included what they call the 1 week of service week, which we worked in the chow hall.
From the beginning of boot camp to the end, had you changed, and how?
I don't think so. I just was doing something I made up my mind to do, and I guess the only change that I think occurred with me was, again, I got to refer to North Carolina, recognition of a bunch of guys from a totally different culture than New England. That was an eye opener for me.
They didn't talk by dropping their R's.
No, or adding them where they don't belong. But it was that part was different, and I could see it amongst the administrative end of boot camp also, because there were people from all over, and that was really my first introduction to people from away,
Another part of the country.
right? And I said, okay, and later, my next command after boot camp was in Tennessee, the Naval Air Technical Training Center.
Is that in Memphis? No.
It's a little bit north of Memphis, a place called Millington. There was a Naval Air Reserve Station there also, but I don't think it's active anymore.
Now, during this time, were you still in hopes that OCS would come through?
Oh, no. I'd already received rejection in August. That was history. So when I was at Millington, at the Enlisted Naval Air Technical Training Center, several of us were taken to another classroom, and one of the instructors came in and said, "We've reviewed your records, and everyone in this room qualifies for aircrew if you were interested in it." I immediately thought of, flying plus flight pay. What didn't seem like a lot today, but an $8,000 plus college debt.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And that's, it's okay. You guys will go through what we call the pipeline training after here. You will either be on a carrier flying in S2Fs, which were anti-submarine 2-engine prop planes, or HS2s, which are dipping sonar helicopter types, or Orion P-3 shore-based anti-submarine planes. And that's what I end up with eventually, was the P-3s.
So once you completed your technical training in Millington, where did you go?
The next step was San Diego, where you get your Millington, Tennessee was basic electronics school primarily, plus something they call P school, which is a week of introduction to carrier activity and what it's like to be on carrier. San Diego was where we started getting into the specialties, acoustic or non-acoustic anti-submarine warfare operator training. That's also where we had SERE school, survival, escape, resistance, evasion, which was part of it was in San Diego Harbor. and the rest of it was at a desert location about 100 miles from San Diego. Again, there was about 90 of us that went through there at one time.
Wow.
That was an interesting thing too, and it was shortly after the.
Was that an expectation of yours to go through SERE school?
I hadn't really given it any thought. We just found out, okay, you're going to SERE school. Oh, what's that? And I said, it's something all aircrew go through. And
Okay.
the interesting thing, this was not too long after the Mayaguez incident in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, you also had the Pueblo.
Pueblo, that's what I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
Pueblo.
Yeah.
And immediately after this was over with, we had an evaluation class where we critiqued it. And they also critiqued us. And one question was there any attempt in the POW version, which only lasted 24 hours, to simulate anything that the Pueblo crew went through? And they said, no, there's no way we could simulate it. It's just too much that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But supposedly the 24 hours we spent in POW camp was supposed to simulate compressed 5 days worth of experience. Obviously, that included only 1 hour of sleep. So,
Did you get waterboarded?
I did not.
Okay.
All the officers did, including our so-called CO who got it several times. They ended up.
They must have given up.
They ended up putting him in a cage somewhere, and the enemy selected a I don't know if he was a chief or petty officer third class, who eventually they allowed the commanding officer of the POWs privileges, and he did the best he could, given the circumstances. But we had one SEAL just assigned randomly to our company going through the training, and he was their most exasperating experience. They would take him away, waterboard him, and beat him up, and he'd come back. As soon as they release him to the compound, he'd walk right back up to the camp commandant and grin at him. And they'd beat him up and drag him away again, and he'd come right back, and he'd keep doing it. He did that all the time he was there.
It's a SERE.
And we were just, yeah, okay, guy.
Oh, Lord. This has to be mid-69 time frame.
Right.
Okay. Once you got through with your schooling in San Diego, where'd you go?
Next step was NAS Moffett Field to VP-31, which was a training command. That was the first time we saw the inside of a P-3. I should say, prior to this at San Diego, I actually had orders to a P-2 squadron, VP-1 at Whidbey Island, Washington State. And I spent 3 weeks crawling through the P-2 at San Diego, North Island. And just before I was going to ship out, VP-1 was decommissioned.
I'll be done.
So I got orders to eventually VP-19, referred to as Big Red. But the next step in that process is VP-31 Training Command. On the East Coast, it's VP-30. I was only there about a month, I think, and that was in the huge steel blimp hangar at, I guess it's known now as just Ames Research. NASA Ames Research. But after VP-31, we would go across the field to 2 wooden blimp hangars, and that's where as many as 4 or 5 squadrons called their home, at least 2 or 3 of which were deployed overseas at unknown time. So
Going through the schooling, and now you're dealing with P-3, that's the Orion.
right.
Were there any thoughts of being deployed out of the States at that time?
Well, I actually joined VP-19 3 days after they had returned from a deployment in one of the least desirable places in the Pacific, Adak, Alaska.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, it's two-thirds of the way out the Aleutian Islands. It's the middle of nowhere. It's cold.
Yeah.
And the flying is terrible, terribly rough, and especially low altitude. And they just finished that deployment. And it wasn't too long. They told me that during the course of your active duty here, you will probably see 2 deployments.
Okay.
And we eventually, my first one was a Marine Air Station in Iwakuni, Japan. It's about 100 miles south of Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't do much anti-submarine work overseas.
Okay.
Most of our time in Iwakuni, we were doing patrols in the Sea of Japan, between Japan and Russia, or Seas, or whatever you call it. And our surface patrols consisted of, they were radar surface patrols, so I was quite busy. We photographed, identified shipping, rigged them, some technical term for identification, and then get their nationalities, course, speed, and all that. Everything that floated in the Sea of Japan on our particular patrol route was surveyed every day.
Now, going through this period of time, you've got south of you in Japan, or south of Japan, you've got Vietnam going on.
Right.
You've got the aftermath of the Pueblo Incident, and some activity on the 38th parallel in Korea taking place as well. This point in history, and the Cold War with the Russians is
Still hot and heavy.
it's hot and heavy, and that's the doctrine that people are being true. Were you aware of the role you were playing in the Cold War itself at that time? And
Somewhat. I don't think a lot of us had a total appreciation for what we were doing. Maybe some of the officers were much more informed than the enlisted. I don't know. The Sea of Japan patrols were primarily looking for Korean ELINT ships.
right,
But we were also on the lookout for any Russian sub-activity because we were very close to, I think it's Vladivostok naval base, and which was the primary submarine base for the Pacific. But we actually, during that deployment, made a trip to Vietnam, Philippines and Vietnam. It was like a 4-day thing, and when we spent a couple of nights at Cam Ranh Bay before returning home. It was, I'm not really sure why they sent us down there, other than familiarization combined with our standard excuse navigation training. So we wanted to go anywhere. It was called navigation training. So even Hong Kong. So
God, how long were you in Japan?
6 months. That was our typical tour.
And then back to the States?
Back to the States for more training, people cycling in and out of crews. And every time that happened, we had to get numerous requalifications, both individual and entire crew, which required what we call subtime, working with one of our own U.S. subs, doing various sorts of anti-submarine exercises, which were evaluated afterwards to determine whether we got a qual or not. these are quite intense training sessions, because at the outset of each deployment, each squadron and each crew within a squadron had to be as unqualified as possible, because there wasn't going to be any chance overseas for this kind of training,
Right.
especially second deployment, which was home based out of Cubic Point Naval Air Station, which is at the mouth of Subic Bay. Excuse me. We were flying what they called the market time patrols. These patrols were 100-mile swaths in the ocean, about 200 to 300 miles off Vietnam coast. We started a little ways up the North Vietnamese coast. I later found out with carrier cover, although we never talked to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that patrol would work all the way to Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
We had 12 crews and 9 airplanes, and this was a patrol that was done every day throughout the Vietnam War.
What was the purpose?
We were ostensibly looking for infiltrators that would come out from North Vietnam, mostly in small fishing boats, mix it up with what was 90% tanker traffic between the Gulf states and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And they would try to hide amongst those ships. I mean, the sea was lousy with ships. We called it the Yellow Brick Road. It was a busy flight. And if we spotted anything, we would turn it over to a destroyer, and they would intercept it. We were also looking for Russian ELINT type ships, because they were in the area monitoring our Gulf activity.
Around that same area, Vietnam, around through Cambodia. Did you ever target an ELINT ship? Did you ever hit on one?
Several ELINT ships we targeted. I can't recall any infiltrators that we actually found.
Okay.
The other,
And they were Russian.
not the infiltrators; those were via
ELINTs.
Yeah, the ELINTs were all Russian. What made our workload even heavier was that most of that 6-month deployment, we sent a third of our squadron on a detachment to Utapao, Thailand. And many of these market time patrols were actually flown out of Thailand because it was somewhat closer. We would start by flying across the Mekong Delta at 10,000 feet.
Safe enough.
Looking down and just wondering what kind of hell was going on down there, because you could see anything at 10,000.
This would have been 70, 71.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the other thing that happened, this was later on in that deployment, was I'm not sure, India-Pakistan, or I think it was another India-Pakistan uprising. And both the U.S. Navy and the Russian Navy decided to wave the flag in the Indian Ocean.
Oh, great.
So we sent, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was the USS America, I'm not certain, fleet through the Gulf of, we can't remember the name of the Gulf, it's the Malacca Straits, Indonesia, into the Indian Ocean. So we, with support from VP6 out of Hawaii, augmenting us in Thailand, were providing anti-submarine cover, supposedly. It was so far to reach our on-station point that we could only spend 2 hours on station.
Wow.
That's how far out in the Indian Ocean. And I thought the whole thing was a terrible waste of time, because with 2 navies thrashing around in the Indian Ocean, you couldn't hear a submarine if it ran over a side boy. So it was, we were all waving the flag. We did that for a month.
Incredible.
I actually carried a live torpedo. It's the only time I ever carried one.
Is that when you received your air medal?
No, the Air Medal was for flying a minimum of 250 hours in a combat zone, which, interestingly enough, extended 400 miles out from the Vietnam coast.
Wow.
Uh,
Inside that 6 months,
yes,
250 hours, that's a lot of time.
our squadron, we found, I did not find this out until a squadron reunion in 93, that our squadron had flown more hours than any other squadron had in like a 10-year period. And we had a rather good reputation. And there's always the inevitable mid-deployment blues where you get the rumors about being extended on deployment, and nobody ever believes it. I found out at the 93 union that it was real. They wanted to extend us 2 more months. And I guess the powers to be asked our commanding officer, who everyone hated, of course. And this is kind of a career-enhancing position. Sure, is a full commander looking for captain stripes.
Yeah, volunteer the unit for another 2 months. That's a stamp on the resume.
Yeah. I found out at the reunion that he said, no, my people are tired. We're going home. I have a new respect for that man. He said, we've done enough. Somebody else carry below now.
250 hours in a 6 month.
Well,
So what's a typical flight? And how many days a week did you fly?
oh, I don't know how many. Man, a typical market time patrol lasted 9 to 11 hours. That was preceded by a 3-hour pre-flight, which began at 0300, and up to a 1-hour post-flight. Missile duties. Everything from emptying the urinal to debrief.
Right.
But the plane required, whenever we went flying on any tactical mission, the plane had to be 100% up for any mission it might serve. Anti-submarine, where all that stuff had to work. And this is why a 3-hour pre-flight was necessary. Lots of times things didn't work, and this is rapid flurry of activity with the aviation technician shop pulling stuff and putting new stuff in. And we frequently had trouble with my equipment with forward and aft radar coordination, stabilization, things like that. And this is critical.
Yeah, that's the
Surface patrol. And it was a long day. And the flight crew barracks was 7 miles from the air station. It was over near the main gate, Subic Bay. And we were up at 0200 for 6 o'clock takeoff.
Oh my gosh.
And I think other flights, occasionally we'd have a few training flights. The junior enlisted personnel were tapped for what we called bounce flights, on pilot training. We'd take off here, take off, land. That's what tore up equipment. Constant jarring on the runway. But it was primarily the patrols. In addition to the flying, we also had 3 other categories. Ready alert crew, pre-flight at the same time as the daily patrol. They were backup for that patrol and search and rescue or anything else the Navy deemed necessary.
Right.
There was also a standby alert crew. They pre-flighted at the same time. You had 3 planes pre-flighting at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. They were the backup in case the ready get launched.
Yep.
You also had duty crew. Duty crew washed an airplane or whatever other kind of dirt work there was, the duty crew did it that day. The officers ended up trying to catch up on paperwork because they all had departmental work that they were responsible for in addition to flying. they had a tremendous work. Everybody had a tremendous workload. It was rare to get more than 1 day off in a month.
And in this 6-month period of time, you never got any R&R either, did
We had one RR, I think it was the latter part of the second month, my crew, we went to Hong Kong for 2 nights.
Oh, boy. Was that a thrill?
Actually, it was.
Okay.
We had some guys in the crew some of the younger guys that all they were interested in was going to a bar and getting drunk in the bar or the hotel. And there was another fellow on the crew, acoustic operator, and he was a E6. We decided no matter where we went, whether it was Hong Kong or some other place we went, China, Taiwan, there were tours available. And we figured we may never be here in it.
That's right. Take a tour.
And we took every tour we possibly could. And another place was Bangkok.
Oh, yeah.
Bangkok.
That's the favorite haunt.
Bangkok, occasionally we got an overnight from Utapao, and we would go up there on a bus.
Mm-hmm.
That I swear it had no shock absorbers.
Well, probably not.
But the river tours and temple tours in Bangkok were very interesting. And I knew this is something I would never see again.
Did you take pictures? Did you ever? Okay.
That was the thing at the time on these West deployments. Everybody bought a can. Everybody bought stereo equipment.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in Subic Bay, we were warned ahead of time once when the Coral Sea was coming in. There were 1 or 2 carriers in the Gulf of Tonkin all the time, and they'd been out like 2 months, and they were coming in for Liberty. And said, if you want anything in the Navy Exchange, you better get it before the Spy 1,000 sails arrive.
That's right.
With money to burn. They stripped the shelves.
Yeah.
In the Navy Exchange. They just,
incredible. The time you were there, were you married at the time or still single?
I met my wife between the 2 deployments.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we were computer dates.
No. Originals.
We were both from New England, so there was a natural, tie there. So.
Okay.
And we got married a month and a half before my second deployment.
And what was life when you went on your second? Was she back in California at the time?
Yeah, she and a roommate had gone to California.
Okay.
They were both. Her roommate was a lab tech, and my wife was an X-ray tech.
For the kids who might be watching this, how did you communicate with her during your second deployment?
At the time, snail mail, and believe me, snail. She would write letters to me through the Fleet Post Office address. It was FPO San Francisco, box number, whatever. And mail could take up to 2 weeks each way.
Yeah.
So it wasn't instantaneous. There was no email. Computers didn't exist then.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phones didn't exist. There was none of that. I made one phone call to her from the Philippines, and neither one of us really enjoyed the phone call because even though we were prepared for the interminable sound delay, it's very disconcerting.
The Pacific Cable.
Yeah, it's very disconcerting. And why is there such a pause? Or what's wrong? But anyway, one of the most difficult things, and anybody in the service who's been in the service overseas knows this, if there's any sort of argument or misunderstanding in the mail, it can take months to straighten it out because of overlapping letters and this horrible lead time with the mail. And you really have, if you're going on another deployment, you know that you got to be careful what you say on both sides, right? So that there are no misunderstandings. You really got to communicate with your partner, and stupid things can happen, and that wouldn't happen today with the age of electronics. It was a reality then.
Speaking of electronics, here you are, you're at a radar scope, an old cathode ray tube.
Yeah,
Did the equipment that you used change?
not while I was in service.
Okay. So it was still, was it?
It was it's called the AFS-80. It was an airborne radar. There's actually two radars, two separate radars that were coordinated together on the screen, a forward sweep and a backwards. So you get a circular sweep, but on each 90-degree quarter, there's a little blip when they crossed over. And they were fine most of the time when you're flying straight and level. But as soon as the plane went into any kind of bank, it started pulling G's. It seemed like, well, first you started getting spurious returns, but it seemed like at times that the antennas struggled with the G's.
G frozen.
Just trying to keep up. And you'd just wait till you come out of the turn before you had a decent view again.
That had been hard on the eyes. Those long flights like that.
It was hard for me for two reasons. Number one, I suffered acute insomnia overseas. Open barracks was all we had. And you had, up to 12 crews all on different schedules. Lockers banging, music playing.
All hours of the day.
The lights out stuff was, this was stuff that was all enforced stateside. But overseas, it's kind of a hands-off thing. And secondly, it seemed often there were patrols I went on with no sleep whatsoever.
Oh, boy.
So I was dragging, and between that mesmerizing radar screen and the fact that I sat in what was the hottest part of the airplane because I was surrounded by electronics, I was almost in line with the engines. We get halfway through a flight, and I'm in front of that screen. No, I was afraid. In fact, there were times when it wasn't too busy. I actually learned how to doze for 1 minute.
I think we all do at some time. I looked
at the screen and then,
yep. I think we all learn that lesson every now and then.
Because I couldn't believe I did this, because sleeping was not permitted on the plane.
No.
We had a couple of bunks, but that was only in extreme situations for very long flights where we had backup pilots.
Now, did you have a backup non-acoustical operator?
No.
On the flight? So you were able for
actually
flight.
I had a trainee.
Okay.
Who was totally inept. And it was very, very frustrating experience. So
when the plane took off and you got going, were your eyes on that scope from time of takeoff to return, or was it only a certain period of the mission?
No, during takeoff, we call it condition 1. With the exception of the pilots and the flight engineer, everybody else is in chairs facing backwards, with helmets on, all survival gear and life jackets and all that. And after takeoff, there was sub-condition 2, where one individual was assigned to get up and open every single electronics bay to check for fire or smoke. This was part of the aircrew qualification. So what you had to pass an exam to get your aircrew wings. You didn't get it just by being assigned to the crew. You had to know what every piece of equipment on the airplane did.
Oh, yeah.
and where its circuit breaker was. It's just like being on a submarine.
Mm-hmm.
You had to know everything about that boat.
Well, with such a small crew, if somebody went down, somebody had to be there to take over for them.
Well, another part of the aircrew qualification was you had, like for ditching responsibilities, everybody had a different responsibility for ditching. Mine was grab the portable radio. Others was to launch a life raft. And, like the navigator is supposed to grab navigation materials. But if that person was incapacitated or dead, somebody else had to carry his load, and you had to know everybody's responsibility on that plane. Depending on how many people on the plane, you might be sitting a different position. You might be sitting an observer's position. You had to know what that guy's responsibility was. Anyway, the fire smoke thing was what we did in Condition 2. And once that was an all clear, reported to the cockpit, there was set Condition 3, which meant you could get up and move around. And that's when most of us tech operators, particularly radar, would fire up the radar. I mean, it was on standby, but we would start radiating.
Right.
Everything was running all the time. And power was on the airplane. It just, obviously for safety purposes, the radar was not emitted on the ground. But from that point on, I would kind of follow the navigation route a little bit and give some radar reference points to the navigator.
During this whole time, 2 deployments, the one to Japan and of course the one to Subic Bay, were you able to get any actual flight time in? Were you able to, did they allow you to fly, or
it was
as part of the redundancy too?
Well,
no.
Once in a blue moon, and only, I don't think we ever did it overseas, but stateside, if somebody wanted, one of the enlisted crew wanted to, they'd let us sit the right seat and try to fly straight and level, which is the hardest thing to do with an airplane. Particularly when the rest of your crew is running back and forth up and down the fuselage to upset the center of balance.
Exactly.
And so you end up chasing the altimeter.
So did you get that checked?
Yeah, once.
Did that satisfy your urge to fly going back to when you were 18?
No.
Okay.
6 or 7 years, I'm not sure when, but several years after I got out of the service, I actually became a private pilot.
Oh, wow.
And I did that until 93. Actually, I had my own plane for one, but I wasn't one of those pilots that had to go flying like a golfer has to go golfing. It's just something I always wanted to do, and I did it, and I moved on.
Okay.
So
okay. Anything else happen in your employment out of the Philippines and Vietnam during that deployment?
Oh, nothing noteworthy that I can think of. So it's just
you return back to the States.
Mhm.
You see your new wife for the second time in 8 months. 6 months. Okay. And then what?
I ended up. Well, there's actually more to my story.
Fire away.
I only flew for 4 months on the second deployment.
How come?
I guess you'd say I had a little bit of a breakdown. Due to the acute insomnia. We've already talked about the tremendous number of hours we were putting in, and my crew had one of the top hours. And one day, I once again did the bark at time patrol with no sleep. And I got back to the barracks that evening, just before going to supper. We said, okay, let's go see what's on the flight schedule and see what kind of ground training we have tomorrow. Due to a shortage of radar operators for other reasons, I had been thrust into someone else's crew for the following days.
Oh,
Mark time patrol.
Another 12-hour job.
and I lost it.
Mm-hmm. Well, with insomnia, anxiety builds up, stress.
I'm going to tell you, if you're going to lose it, even if it's just for a few minutes, it's perfectly okay to call a skipper in his private quarters and take it out on him. He won't mind.
Oh, Lord.
I got off the flight, and he said, "Okay, DellaPenna, come see me, Warren." That was it on the phone. And the next morning, the senior chief in my division said, right after muster, he said, "You're expected in the captain's office." I says, "Thank you, Chief."
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he escorted me up there. And there were quite a few people in the room. And the mood was rather somber.
Waiting for you.
And including my patrol plane commander, my lieutenant commander, who was my tactical coordinator, the senior chief from my division, a couple other people, and the skipper. And the skipper looked at me and he says, "How about a DellaPenna?" He says, "How about a change in jobs?" And I said, "How about it?" And he says, "How about it, sir?" Things went downhill from there, and I signed what we call the page 13, which is your volunteer status for flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I became one of the assistant squadron duty officers, which is just an 8-hour watch every day.
Mm-hmm.
Literally assisting the daily duty officer, who was a flight officer from one of the crews. And I actually enjoyed that job, particularly during peak operations. And I eventually earned the captain's favor because of the performance in that position. We had other radar operators who had quit flying for conscientious reasons. They were Vietnam objectors, and this irritated me. I said, "Yeah, okay, you signed up to do a job," and I quit because I couldn't hold together anymore. I was just not there mentally. And to me, doing a conscientious job was paramount, and something that I could not control was taking that away from me. And I mean, I was being short with people. I was jumping on people, and I was not pleasant to be around during that last month in the air. And no one knew what was going on. I didn't share it with anybody. To this day, the skipper doesn't really know why I had to quit flying.
Yeah.
I just never bothered explaining it. Right.
Once you got back on the ground and into the duty officer's position, what happened to the Insomnia?
Oh, it cleared up immediately. I was transferred out of the flight crew barracks into the ground pounders barracks. And even though I started with the midnight shift, I eventually moved to the 0200, 0300 shift. My rest time was always the same time every day. Meal time was the same time every day. Flight crew, even though we usually ended up back in the same time zone, because of our erratic schedules, we didn't sleep at the right same time, we didn't eat the same time. It was 6 months of jet lag.
Yeah.
Our bodies were just screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a primary reason the skipper said, "No, my people are tired."
So you got back into his good favor. Then what happened?
Well, anyway, back stateside, there was I discovered I only had like a few months of that. I think 4 or 5 months of active duty remaining. And I heard about a program, a military civilian program, where you could get the equivalent of an early out if you entertain some sort of training that was sponsored. And I took advantage of it. I was not just wasting my time here, in the duty office stateside. It wasn't a particularly critical position stateside. And I ended up going to Anthony Schools for real estate.
Oh, okay.
And I became California real estate agent. Hey, get one of them. Before moving back east. Well, no. It wasn't actually that didn't work out too well. And eventually my wife and I moved up in the foothills of the Sierras in California.
Oh, wow.
And I was an accountant for the small, what they call a unified school district.
So you left active service in 72? Right. 72 would have been June or September. Or early out would have been...
Officially September.
Yeah. And then you just went up into the hills for how long?
We were there one winter, and at the time, we were living a screwy schedule. At the time, my wife, as I told you, had been an X-ray tech, and she had moved from Palo Alto Medical Clinic to Stanford Hospital.
Oh, boy.
And she was working 2 16-hour shifts on the weekend with 8-hour rest in between them.
Oh, boy. And commuting back.
Commuting back the 150 miles to where we lived in the foothills of the Sierras, where she was taking classes with the university system in California to get her degree. And because she never had a degree and something she wanted to do. And meanwhile, she kept trying to look for an X-ray job somewhere in the Sierras, and all there were was small hospitals and clinics. You had to wait for somebody to die to get a job.
Right.
And we eventually decided this is crazy, and we moved back to the Bay Area. And I got back into real estate again. And it was my idea to stay in California. I had no desire to move back east. She missed the green of New England, the New England heritage and all of that. And eventually we decided to move back east, and it was either Massachusetts or Maine. We had 2 houses to sell, so I stayed out there and she moved, and we ended up in Maine.
Whereabouts in Maine?
A little town called Hope, South Hope. It's about 10 miles inland from Rockland and Camden.
Okay.
It's about halfway between Portland and Bangor.
Now, you stayed as an inactive Naval Reserve?
Yeah, for the next year.
Following
year months.
your enlistment. Okay. When you look back on that time, any regrets?
No. I often say that my active duty, I experience some of my worst times and some of my best times. To this day, the one thing I dearly miss in civilian life, because I'd never found it, is the camaraderie and joint sense of purpose of a group of guys all same position. I just never found that in civilian life.
I don't know if you
I don't think
unless you're some kind
maybe some very, very progressive companies.
yes, you have to be so focused in. That's almost hard to find in any corporate environment.
It is, and that is a bit of nostalgia I missed that I was not prepared for. It was just a fantasy from that point on to find that kind of environment, and it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so in 93, when they had a reunion, which was in San Diego, on the carrier that's in harbor now, that's a museum, I forget the name of it, a part of the reunion is there. I just jumped at it.
Well, now, was this a squadron reunion?
Squadron reunion. We found out 2 years prior to that, the officers had a reunion in Jacksonville.
Oh, okay.
It was officers only, but this was the first and only reunion that the entire squadron had.
How many showed for?
It was probably 2/3 officers, 1/3 enlisted, some with their wives,
Mm-hmm.
many without, because it was expensive especially for me to fly cross country and
Oh, yeah.
stay at a hotel near North Island, and but it was. I would have liked to seen more people there, especially from my own crew. My ordnanceman from the first deployment would have loved to go. He lives in Kansas, but he just could not financially do it. And
Are they planning any others?
they tried 2 years later to do another one in Washington State. My patrol plane commander
Mm-hmm.
did the first one. He ramrodded the first one. He said, it was fun, but he said, I'm going to do it again. They have tried twice since then, but they were unable in both instances to get the advance commitment from enough people to satisfy the hotel, which wanted commitments a year in advance.
Yeah.
Which I found a little extraordinary. But
That goes with the territory. When you look back on it, I asked about regrets. Can you name one thing that you took with you about your time in the Navy that has stuck with you all these years?
I know it's a corny repetition of what we've heard many times, but despite political feelings of mine that are adverse to the military many times, freedom isn't free.
Mm-hmm.
That's still with me. You got to put your time in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, in many respects, I didn't like the pressure of the draft when it existed, when I had to face it. But without the draft, that incentive to do something for your country is just not there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it also forced young men in particular to grow up earlier and make some darn decisions. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
After you get out of high school or college. Don't give me this, I don't know yet. What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Make a decision. Do something. And but I also, going back to the patriotic thing, I think there is probably it's just because of the era that I grew up in, it was expected that you would go in the service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't question it. I didn't matter if Vietnam was going or what you felt about it. You did it.
There's I don't know if I could describe it as a higher sense of duty. It was something coming from a background where my father was in the service and everything. It was something that you just knew you had to do.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like to add?
I guess not. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you for your service too.
Hi, I'm a spokesperson for World War Heroes Chronicles. Every day we lose more veterans and the stories that shaped our world. Actors and movies aren't the real history. Our mission is to transform raw, aging archives into cinematic documentaries that rival Netflix while keeping the truth alive for future generations. To support the channel, you can become a digital librarian on our Patreon for just $5 a month. Your support directly funds the high-definition restoration of these rare records. In return, you'll get early access to our videos and entry to our research library of original archives and service histories. Help us save the next story at the link below.